Hello, everyone. It's Adrienne Rivera. Welcome to the Breath of Gold. Today, I'm really excited to be here with Jim Morningstar, who is the Director of Transformations Incorporated. Welcome.
I'm so glad to be here with you and part of this community that you are creating, which I believe is a gift to our world, much needed at this time.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so honored to have you on. You've been in the breathwork space for years and years and years, and you've also been a clinical psychologist since 1973. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today and talking about ethics, transformation, releasing trauma, and all things breathwork.
Absolutely. It's my favorite topic.
Yes, of course. You and I both. Amazing. So I'd love for you to start by sharing how did you get into breath work and how did you get into being a psychologist? What was your journey like?
Well, I've always been interested in the human phenomenon. What makes us tick, so to speak? And so I was led to the field of psychology because there's science involved in it, but there's also clinical aspects to it to take science and understanding and help people with it. However, after going through 5 years of doctoral training, I realized something's missing here for me. I need to take a time out, as it were. And literally, I said, I'm going to have to go into intensive psychoanalysis myself or take a trip to Africa. So my wife and I jumped on a plane, going back to the roots of civilization, as it were. And there in the Sahara Desert, in a small encampment, I found a book. Travelers just leave books, and it was about the revolution of consciousness starting in the United States. This was 1970, so this is ancient history to most people. But I recognized, oh, there's something here that I'm called to. So we came back to the United States, and I got into the kind of help of, and therapy with people that was embodied bioenergetics. And one of our teachers of Tai Chi, who we flew in from New York, a student of Chen Mencheng, who brought Tai Chi to the United States, said, oh, I've discovered something you might be interested in. And it's called rebirthing breath work, as it were. And well, my ears perked up and I said, absolutely. And after taking a couple of, this is training with the original people, Leonard Orr, Sandra Ray, and all those that started in California. Well, I was there. We put the family on a plane and we traveled anywhere I could get more in this. And of course, I always like to take advantage of whatever opportunities are given. So I became one of the first certified breath workers at that time. And I recognized this has got to be spread through the world. And so it was kind of an exclusive organization at the time. And I said, no, we need to open this up to the world. And so people then went off into creating schools of breath work all around the planet. And I also then brought it to the field of counseling and psychology. I thought, wow, when I saw what happened when I introduced bioenergetics and breath work into counseling, how quickly people made breakthroughs and got things that they could talk about for years, but never get past that barrier of fear of what it is to truly experience their aliveness and the truth of who they are. And so I then spread the word to all the counselors and you know what? Not very many were interested because they had their way of doing things and they invested in that has all changed now, to be sure. But at the time, Spirit said, well, you can't give up. And so I kept doing training and inviting anyone in. And I found it wasn't that their educational background that mattered, it was their level of consciousness. It was their readiness to truly expand and see the world and experience the world and experience relationships in a unique way, a different way, a more inclusive way, a more loving way, if you will. And so I have kept on doing trainings and still doing that today, very involved in it. And in particular, training leaders. That's one of the things Spirit has told me my mission in this life is to support leaders. And that's why I'm so honored again to be with you, Adrienne. You are a leader of a community. And I see the future is not about one person coming along. In fact, Thich Nhat Hanh said this before he died. He said, Maitreya, or the coming of Buddha again on the world, will not be a singular individual. It will be a community. And I believe this is what we are spreading and what we are creating right now. And breath is our guide.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's beautiful to hear your story and how it has evolved and how you were the one of the first trained breathwork facilitators once it gained popularity in the 70s. And, just to hear how you brought it in to the world of psychology, and at first how people were not really open to it. They were stuck in their own ways. Something that you said was really interesting. You said that it wasn't necessarily, a therapist or a professional's level of education. It was their level of consciousness. Can you share a little bit more about that and how we can develop consciousness?
Well, I've been privileged, and I believe it's being led by Spirit to meet certain individuals who are not necessarily well known in the world, but who are pioneers, as it were. Of course, Leonard Orr was one of them. He didn't have any particular educational training in psychology or social work or anything, but he was gifted by Spirit to really open up the wisdom that comes from something other than just our intellect. And that, by the way, is what I want to share today. I'm so excited about because a new way of doing that is something that just came to me before our session here today. But back to the story of my being introduced to he actually was a psychology professor. Clare Graves was his name. And he developed a way of seeing what makes people grow, what creates differences in belief systems, and what creates change from one belief system to another. And he did extensive research, which eventually was supported by the National Institute of Health. And that's where I did my internship, NIMH in Washington, D.C. And he developed this theory of levels of consciousness and gave us what are the elements that take a person from one level of belief and raising their consciousness to another. Talk about fascinating me. All about that. And after studying and learning much of his theory and way of doing it, then I put breathwork into that. And I did work on how breath has evolved in its techniques according to growth in consciousness. And breath has always been there, as we know, from the beginning of our life. As we say, Source, God created breathing life into mud. Well, the mud is the elements of the earth, which comprise our body. And we're doing that right now. We all, sitting here watching this video, we are bringing the breath of life into the elements of the earth, which is creating our unique individual self. And so I have seen now that theory of Clara Graves and levels of consciousness has helped me so much of like, what's going on in the world? Why does it seem that we advance and we're getting enlightened and all of a sudden, boop, we backtrack politically, socially, in every ways? Well, it's part of the growth cycles that happen. We get to a place and we either stay stuck there or we get some new insight. And that is often accompanied by people who have broken out of the trance, as it were, of that particular level, and who see and put together pieces of how we as humans can now share one another's intelligence rather than compete with it. How we can actually come together in ways that advance all of us rather than keep us stuck in envy, greed, competition, and so things. And so during that period of transition, there's often a regression, people going back to earlier stages. And sometimes people get stuck there. And sometimes there's a lot of suffering and things that are caused by that. So I'm not saying, oh, well, it's just a stage. No, it's a stage that we all have to contribute to the growth and the help of awakening, as it were. And so breath work has been there at each of these stages in different forms. And what we are doing now and evolving now is so exciting because breath is teaching us. We're, as I like to say, all working for the same boss. And when we come together, when we breathe in community, such as what we're going to do today, boing, exponentially, it elevates our awareness, our inclusiveness, and our intelligence of the heart, which is what I'm here to share most about today. The intelligence of the heart and how it grows and how the seeds are already planted within us. They were there from birth, in even conception. Those seeds were planted. The heart is one of the first organs to develop. And we actually practice breathing in utero, even though we're not breathing air. The muscles of respiration are being developed right there in utero. And Spirit is informing us all along. Birth is one of those rites of passage, but there are many others in our life. And I believe we are approaching that right now in humanity. We are about to take a much greater leap, but it's going to mean releasing a lot of the old trauma, a lot of the old things that have frozen us into place. And as you well know, Adrienne, breath work is the tool par excellence to help release trauma. Because if we just talk about it or just relive it, we can reinforce it. And so trauma is stored, as we know, in the right brain. And it's the non logical and non rational. And so it takes courage to actually go in and to breathe in a way which accesses the right brain and all of that material which got repressed or frozen. Implicit only memory, as it were, that we are now accessing through using faster than normal breathing, as well as slower than normal breathing. You asked about, I call my school therapeutic breath work, and it's not one kind of breathing. It's a toolbox. There's different breath for different circumstances. And even though it may be a technique like coherent breathing or whatever it is, it still has to be adapted to my life at this time.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what better timing to experience this? I know you have a beautiful experience for us with the breath. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about, how we can make the most out of it, if we can do this seated, if we should lie down, etc.